Struggling in research? Worry no more because we are here to help. Hello everyone, greetings. I am Alisa Beatrice de CAILING and allow me to introduce all of our tutors for today. So we have here Liz and Luisa, Jaila and Kim, and lastly is Eliza and Jamaica. So our topic for today is all about how to construct a research framework. And we all know that conceptual framework offers an illustration of how the entire research process will be explored and explains the relationships of the concepts in the paper. A conceptual framework in research is very crucial because it is used to understand the research problem and guide the development and analysis of the research. We divided this lesson into 4 parts for you to be able to comprehend it fully. Now let us pay attention to our tutors who will educate us about constructing a research framework.
Good day, everybody. In today's lesson, we are going to talk about how to create a conceptual framework in defining of terms. First things first, there are 2 kinds of framework, the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework. But for today's video, we are going to focus about the conceptual framework. Now, what is conceptual framework? According to Luft and Jung in 2022, conceptual framework is a researcher's understanding of the variables and or factors involved in the study, as well as how they relate to each other. Well, according to Emenda in 2014, a conceptual framework is a combination of variables and interconnected parts that aid in resolving a real-world issue. Now, how is conceptual framework significant? According to Ravich and Regan in 2016, prior to connecting these to the different other facets and influences on your research, a conceptual framework assists in identifying and clarifying what you know, you are invested in, and value as key components of a study. Now, let's proceed on how to construct a conceptual framework. First things first is we should choose a topic. Decide on the subject of your research. Second, conduct a literature review. Look at existing studies to see what has been researched. Third, identify which variables will be investigated. Determine the key factors or variables you will study. And fourth is to create a conceptual framework. Show how these variables connect and influence each other. Now, let me show you an example of conceptual framework that consists of independent variable. This example is all about a study on education and test scores. The independent variable here is the type of teaching method, while the dependent variable is the student's test scores after receiving the instruction. Independent variable is the variable that is manipulated or changed in an experiment, while dependent variable is the variable that is measured or observed to assess the effect of the independent variable. In summary, the conceptual framework helps structure the study, guiding the researchers in identifying key factors and ensuring clear definitions for accurate understanding and analysis. Now, let's move on to defining of terms. Defining of terms is to set limits on the use of specific terminology in the study. Definitions are required. According to Pilav in 2008, they encapsulate complex ideas into concise expressions, aiding in education and scientific research. There are also 2 types of definition, conceptual definition and operational definition. Conceptual definition explains the meaning of the notion, while operational definition explains how to quantify it. Now let me show you an example of conceptual definition. Academic performance refers to a student's ability to achieve educational goals, while in operational definition, academic performance is measured by the student's GPA at the end of the semester. By providing both conceptual and operational definitions, the researchers clarifies what they meant by terms and how they will measure it in the study. This ensures consistency and precision throughout the research. Now, to assess your understandings, I have prepared 3 simple questions for you to answer in the comment section. First is, which is not part of creating a conceptual framework? Second, which type of framework outlines the researcher's assumption? Third, what is an operational definition?
That is all, and thank you for listening.
Good day, everyone. Our lesson 2 focuses on formulating a hypothesis for quantitative research. Let's start with the basics. What is research hypothesis? A research hypothesis, also called a scientific hypothesis, is a statement about the expected outcome of a study. It is also a tentative proposition about the relationships between two or more variables. It's a roadmap for your entire study, guiding your data collection and analysis. Essentially, it's a prediction of what you expect to find. Now, a good hypothesis has key characteristics. First, it must be falsifiable. You need to be able to design a study that could potentially disprove it. Second, it needs to be predictable, clearly outlining the expected relationship between your variables. Think a cause and effect. Also, it should be simple and specific, easy to understand, and focus on your research question. Let's continue with the characteristics of a strong hypothesis. It needs to be grounded in existing knowledge, building on what we already know. Crucially, your variables need to be operationally defined, meaning you have a clear plan for how you'll measure them. And finally, it must be directly relevant to your research problem. So, how do we actually formulate a strong hypothesis? We start by clearly defining the research problem. Then, we create an if-then statement to clearly show the predicted relationship. Next, we carefully define our independent and dependent variables, what we're manipulating and what we're measuring. Finally, and importantly, we must ensure our hypothesis is testable and design our study to test it.
There are types of research hypothesis. We have null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis, there is no relationship or difference between the variable being studied. For example, there is no relationship between customer satisfaction and product quality. And second, alternative hypothesis, there is a relationship or difference between the variables. For example, there is a relationship between customer satisfaction and product quality. Additionally, alternative hypothesis can be categorized into 2 types. First, directional hypothesis. Second, non-directional hypothesis. Let's go for directional hypothesis. This hypothesis indicate that the relationship or differ between the variables has a specific direction. For non-directional hypothesis, this hypothesis suggests a relationship or differ without specifying a direction. For example of directional hypothesis, more millennials prefer remote work compared to Generation X. For non-directional hypothesis, millennials has Generation X differ in their preference for remote work. There are also errors in hypothesis testing. Type 1 error, rejecting the null hypothesis when it's actually true. Second, type 2 error, failing to reject the null hypothesis when it's actually false. In both qualitative and quantitative research, the core idea of a testing relationship or difference between variables is consistent through the approach, and data collection method may differ. Quantitative research often uses statistical method to test hypotheses, while qualitative research may rely more on interpretation and observation. And that's it. Thank you.
Now, let's tackle lesson 3, setting the scope of quantitative research. So, do you know the scope of your study? Okay, so let's find out. Our learning objectives are identifying the scope, limitations, and delimitation of the study. Next is construct a well-written scope and limitations of your study. So, I have a question. Do you know what is scope? Scope refers to the boundaries and extent of a study, defining its specific objectives, target population, variables, and limitations, which helps researchers focus and provide a clear understanding of what will be investigated. In simple words, it is the extensive content that will be covered by your study.
So let's start with scope. This refers to the main focus of your project, including the central question that you're addressing and your objectives. It's about setting the boundaries for what you'll explore. For example, the scope could be learning to play guitar within 6 months. This clearly specifies the goal of learning the guitar rather than other instruments, and it also includes a defined time frame.
So let's move on to limitations. The limitation of a study is its flaws and shortcomings, which could be the result of unavailability of resources, small sample size, and etc. Listing the limitation of your study reflects honesty and transparency and also shows that you have a complete understanding of the topic. Basically, it is the weakness in a study that you have no control with as a researcher.
Now, let's talk about limitation. These are the factors that may hinder your project and are typically beyond your control, such as restricted resources, time limitation, or personal skills.
So, let's continue by discussing the limitation. It is the boundaries that the researcher sets in a research study, deciding what to include and what to exclude. The limitation helps to narrow down the study and make it more manageable and relevant to the research goal. To put it simply, the limitation helps your study become more feasible.
For example, the limitation might state concentrating on basic chords and strumming patterns, learning only popular songs, and not diving into music therapy. These choices simplify the learning process, even if other areas could be explored.
These are factors to consider in writing limitation and delimitation. First is sample size. It is the number of participants or data points in a study. Next is time frame. It is the period of time it takes to conduct a research project or experiment, which can range from hours to several months. Next is financial resources, the money and other assets used to fund a research project. Lastly is access to literature. Some of relevant and related literature are difficult to access. In conclusion, setting the scope of quantitative research is a foundational step that guides the entire research process, ensuring the study remains focused, manageable, and relevant to its objectives. Researchers must consider factors such as time, budget, and access to participants or data when defining the boundaries of their research. This practical consideration ensures that the research is feasible and that the scope remains realistic, preventing the study from being too broad or too narrow. And that's it in lesson 3. I hope you learned something.
Good day, everyone. My name is Luisa Jane Linares, and today I will be discussing to you the importance of identifying the significance in quantitative research. So what is significance in quantitative research? So significance, this will tell the reader how the findings affect the topic. In other words, the significance is about how much the findings matter. So in quantitative research, the significance, this is refers to the importance and potential contribution of a research study, while it highlights the contribution of a target group of people by specifically stating the importance of conducting a research study. So how can we identify the significance? So when we identify the significance, we can already undergo with a research question. So first question that will be, what problem is this study addressing? And what contribution of this study in the field of research? To understand that more, I will give you some example. So we have here an example of a research topic entitled The Impact of Online Learning on High School Student Academic Performance. So in that topic, the question is, does online learning have a positive or negative effect on high school student academic performance compared to the in-person learning? So in that example, we can easily identify the significance because it already provides a clear justification and also it already demonstrates the significance. So next is, in the context of research, there are two aspects that we need to understand. That is the beneficiary and the benefits in quantitative research. So what is beneficiary and benefits in quantitative research? So beneficiary, these are the individual, group, or organization who will directly or indirectly benefit from a research. While the benefits, this is refers to a positive outcome or advantage that arise from a research finding. So to understand that more, I will provide you an example. So we have here an example of a research topic entitled The Impact on Teachers' Attitude on the Implementation of Inclusive Education. So in that topic, we can already identify the beneficiaries, which is the teachers. So in that topic, we have two benefits, which is the positive and the negative effect. So the positive effect of that topic is that teachers with a positive attitude towards an inclusive will be more likely to implement effective environment for students with special needs. And the benefits that has a negative effect, which is some teachers may feel unprepared or overwhelmed, leading to a lack of proper support for students with special needs in the classroom. So in conclusion, by identifying the significance of the study in a quantitative research, it is important to provide a clear justification for a research by demonstrating its relevance and highlights its potential impact. So that would be all about the lesson 4 entitled the Identifying the Significance in a Quantitative Research.
And that's all. I hope that you learned a lot of things about how to construct a research framework. And you could also share it with your friends so that they will be able to learn a lot of things just like you. And yeah, thank you for watching and have a great day. Thank you.